My name is Nova, 34 years old. I had just slipped off my shoes when her voice pierced through the hallway, sharp and deliberate, the kind of voice that doesn't just talk to you but makes sure the neighbors hear every syllable. Still no breakfast on the table. Nova, you had all morning. What were you doing, sleeping again? Her words clanged through the walls like pots banging together. My mind, fogged from 12 straight hours in the ER, registered them only halfway. 3 traumas, 1 code blue, 2 patients screaming in pain until their throats were raw, and now this, Bella, my mother-in-law, standing in her lavender nightgown, arms crossed like a queen waiting for her servant. It's 8:47, Bella, I muttered, my voice flat. I got home 20 minutes ago. I left you breakfast in the fridge last night. Jacob must have... Don't pin this on Jacob. Her interruption was crisp, triumphant, like she'd rehearsed it. I didn't see a damn thing in the fridge, and even if I had, what? You think a cold omelet counts as breakfast? I didn't answer. My body moved on autopilot, shuffling toward the kitchen. The handle of the frying pan burned my palm before I even turned the stove on. I hissed, dropping it onto the counter. Only then did I realize the skin on my hands was raw, split from antiseptic and constant scrubbing. Bella hovered behind me, wine glass posture in the morning light, supervising as if I might poison her toast if she looked away for 2 seconds. The worst part wasn't her verbal jabs. It was the way she said everything loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. Ruby can't even cook eggs last week. Still no grandchild the week before. Always staged for an audience I couldn't see. You know, she sighed now, leaning against the doorway. Some women balance motherhood and a full-time job. You can't even manage a couple of eggs and toast. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted iron. When I married Jacob, I thought I was marrying into a normal family. Not rich, but steady. We had plans, maybe a condo of our own, a rescue dog, trips to places we'd only circled on maps. I had my job at the pediatric clinic back then, and he worked in software sales. We were equals, or so I believed. Then Bella began dropping hints. I get so lonely since your father took that job in Georgia. Jacob, sheepish one evening, said, maybe we could stay with her for a little bit, help out, save for a down payment faster. A little bit turned into a year and a half. The savings never happened. What did happen was Bella sliding into control as easily as a hand into a silk glove. At first it was small favors. Nova, could you throw in a load of laundry while I'm out? Then comparisons. Jacob's always liked my way of folding shirts. Then mandates. You should cook more. It's what a good wife does. And Jacob? He never said no. Just shrugged, eyes on his laptop. You know how she is. It's not worth the argument. Easy for him to say. He didn't have to stand in that kitchen every morning. By the time I switched to the emergency hospital, I thought maybe Bella would back off. She knew ER shifts were brutal. She'd once said she respected nurses. She even smiled at me the day I brought home my new badge. That lasted all of a week. You got off at 8 a.m.? Great. Can you vacuum before you nap? You were on your feet all night, so that's exercise. Efficient. And the comment that stung most, you're not pregnant yet? Maybe stress isn't the only problem. I remember suggesting to Jacob that we both get checked. The doctor says it's best to evaluate both sides, I told him. He looked at me like I'd asked him to set himself on fire. I'm not doing that. That's humiliating. It's not, I said. It's medical. He cut me off. This is your issue. You're the one who wants a baby so bad. Take your vitamins and figure it out. He didn't even look up from his phone. Now, running on no sleep, I cracked eggs into the pan, watching the yolks bleed into each other. Bella's muttering continued behind me about how her friend's daughter conceived on her honeymoon, while I could barely keep my eyes open. I placed her plate down silently. She clicked her tongue. No coffee? I made the coffee. Then I washed the dishes. Then I wiped the counter until it gleamed. My phone buzzed with 5 missed texts from my supervisor. Could I pick up an extra shift on Sunday? I hesitated. Sunday was Bella's birthday. That night, while brushing his teeth, Jacob handed me a sheet of paper. Mom wrote this list out for the party. I scanned it. 14 names I didn't recognize. Starred instructions for appetizers, mains, desserts, even specific wine brands. Notes on which plate set to use. I'm scheduled for a night shift Saturday, I said. I'll get home at 8 in the morning. Her party's at 2. You'll manage. He spat toothpaste into the sink. Just nap in between. You're always up late anyway. Will you help cook? I asked. He paused, toothbrush dangling from his hand. I mean, you're better at it. I barely remember falling asleep that night. My legs twitched from carrying too many trays of syringes. My dreams smelled like boiling pasta water. The next morning, Bella poked her head into my room at 11:45. Lunch. I didn't move. Nova. Still nothing. She opened the door wider. I've been waiting 20 minutes. You don't want me to pass out, do you? I dragged myself upright, bones cracking like bubble wrap. By 12:15, I was boiling pasta, grating cheese, tasting sauces I couldn't even smell anymore. Bella stood in the doorway, sipping her morning wine. Oh, and remember Sunday, use the floral plates, not the blue ones. The blue ones are cheap. I said nothing. You'll make enough, right? Your father-in-law is coming in from Georgia. I froze. Dean. Jacob's father. The only one in that family who'd ever treated me like a human being. I hadn't seen him in months. Something flickered inside me. Hope, maybe. If anyone noticed how bad things had gotten, it would be him. But Sunday was coming fast, and I was already breaking. That night, I checked my phone again. The missed calls included one voicemail from an unfamiliar Atlanta number. I didn't play it. Not yet. Instead, I stared at Bella's party list still pinned to the fridge with a floral magnet. 14 strangers expecting food, wine, and laughter. And me, expected to produce it all on no sleep. As I turned away, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. Pale face, bloodshot eyes, hair pulled back with a stretched-out rubber band I'd found on the doorknob. A crack split across the porcelain plate in the drying rack behind me. Tiny, almost invisible. But cracks have a way of widening when you keep pressing on them. And I couldn't shake the thought. If no one protects me, I will. When Jacob first suggested moving in with his mother, he made it sound temporary. Just a little bit, he'd said, almost apologetic. Help her out. Save money faster. Get to a down payment sooner. At the time, it sounded reasonable. His father had taken that job in Georgia. Bella was alone in this big old house with creaking floorboards and antique clocks that never chimed at the right hour. Jacob framed it like a win-win. We'd be generous, she'd be grateful, and in a year, we'd have our own place. I told myself it would be like camping out. Tight quarters, borrowed time, but survivable. A year and a half later, I was still here, still cooking in her kitchen, still folding towels the right way, still paying rent with sweat and silence. It started small, Bella's voice drifting from the laundry room. Nova, could you throw in a load while I'm out? I said yes. Why not? We were staying under her roof. Then, Jacob's always liked my way of folding shirts. A week later, you should be cooking more. It's what a good wife does. None of it came as direct orders, not at first. She dripped her expectations like water from a faucet you couldn't quite turn off. By the time I realized I was drenched, it was too late. Jacob never stopped her. Whenever I brought it up, he'd shrug, eyes fixed on his laptop. You know how she is. It's not worth the argument. Maybe not for him. He could disappear into code and emails. I couldn't disappear from a kitchen where every motion was observed and scored. At first, I thought Bella was simply bored, the kind of widow, in all but name, who filled her days by micromanaging. But it went deeper. Her friends, all those women with polished nails and pearls clinking against champagne glasses, already had grandchildren. They compared baby showers, cooed over photos of chubby cheeks. Bella smiled at their stories, but afterwards she'd look at me with that tight-lipped expression, like I was a cracked vase she couldn't return to the store. One night, sitting at the kitchen island, she refilled her wine and said casually, You know, my friend Linda's daughter conceived on her honeymoon. No stress, no waiting. Isn't that something? I kept my eyes on my notes for work, but the jab landed. Jacob didn't help. He treated fertility like a shameful rumor, something you don't speak about in polite company. Let's both get checked, I suggested one night. The doctor says it's best to evaluate both sides. He froze, toothbrush halfway to his mouth. I'm not doing that. That's humiliating. It's not. It's just medical. This is your issue, he snapped. You're the one desperate for a baby. Go take vitamins, do yoga, whatever. He went back to scrolling his phone as though the conversation had ended. That was when I started carrying the clinic envelope in my purse. I hadn't opened it. Just knowing it was there, sealed, definitive, felt like a weight pressing against my ribs. Bella didn't let up. The day I switched from the pediatric clinic to the ER, I thought she might respect me more. She even said, ER nurses, now that's impressive, when I showed her my new badge. For 1 week, she smiled at me over breakfast. For 1 week, she didn't hover. Then came the comments. You got off at 8? Perfect. You can vacuum before you nap. Or, being on your feet all night counts as exercise. How efficient. Then the dagger. Not pregnant yet? Maybe stress isn't the only problem. Her words slid under my skin and stayed there. It wasn't just control, it was fear. I began to see it in her eyes. When she scrolled through her phone, comparing herself to her friends, fear of being the odd one out, fear of becoming irrelevant. She masked it with jabs and tasks, but underneath was desperation. That didn't excuse her cruelty, but it explained the sharp edges. One evening, while I was setting the table, I caught her whispering on the phone in the pantry. I know, I told them. But she's not trying hard enough. I don't know what's wrong with her. The words weren't meant for me, but they stuck. Not trying hard enough, as if conceiving a child was the same as scrubbing the floor. Jacob came home late that night. I asked if he'd spoken to his mom about boundaries. He rubbed his temples. Nova, she's lonely. Just let it go. Let it go, like I was the problem for noticing. The house itself seemed to conspire against me. The wallpaper in the dining room curled at the edges like it was listening. The antique mirror in the hall reflected me with shadows under my eyes, like an older, wearier version of myself. I'd catch myself staring at cracks in the ceiling plaster, wondering how long before something broke. I still had small havens. The ER, though exhausting, was one. At least there my exhaustion mattered. My patient's parents looked at me with gratitude. My supervisor trusted me. My colleagues laughed in the break room, even when blood stained their shoes. But even that sanctuary was slipping. Bella's voice intruded into my off hours. You're up anyway, so why not iron these? One Sunday, I had an overnight shift that bled into morning. I crawled into bed at 9. By 11, Bella's knock rattled the door. Lunch, she called, like a warden announcing mealtime. I pretended not to hear. Minutes later, the door creaked open. Don't make me wait. You don't want me to faint, do you? Her performance was flawless. If she ever collapsed, the world would believe her. I dragged myself upright. My bones felt hollow. That afternoon, I stirred sauces I couldn't taste, hands trembling, while Bella sipped her wine and reminded me about her birthday party. 14 guests. Use the floral plates, not the blue ones. The blue ones were cheap. Dean was coming home for it, she added. My father-in-law. The only one who'd ever noticed me as more than Jacob's wife. Hope flared for a second, then fizzled. He had been gone too long, working in Georgia, too absent to know how deeply the house had eaten me. That night, I tucked the fertility envelope deeper into my purse. I drafted an email to HR, subject line, shift change request, family issues. I never hit send. At the bottom of my inbox, the voicemail icon still glowed from that Atlanta number. I hovered over it, thumb trembling. Dean, maybe. Or just spam. I didn't play it. The next morning, I found a crack in one of Bella's prized porcelain plates while drying the dishes. Hairline, almost invisible. I stared at it longer than I should have, because I knew what cracks meant. They always widen. The morning of Bella's birthday began like every other, except heavier. I had just clocked out of a night shift at 7:52 a.m., hands trembling from adrenaline crashes when I pulled into the driveway. My eyes blurred against the sunlight, and every blink felt like dragging sandpaper over my corneas. Inside, the house already reeked of artificial vanilla. Bella loved those cheap birthday candles, the ones that burned too thick and clung to the walls like smoke. She was perched in the living room, sequined lavender blouse glittering under the chandelier, curls stiff with hairspray. Good, you're back, she announced without a glance in my direction. Start with the roast, then the canapes. And the wine glasses need polishing. Jacob left fingerprints all over them. No happy Sunday, no thank you, just a checklist. The kitchen looked like a bomb had gone off. Bags of groceries spilling across counters, sticky notes on cabinets. No plastic, use the real glasses. I dropped my bag, tied my hair with a stretched-out rubber band I found on the doorknob, and got to work. I didn't even change out of my scrubs. By 10:30, I'd already boiled 4 pots of water, steamed asparagus, and arranged a cheese board that could have been ripped from Pinterest. My stomach was a hollow pit, but there was no time to eat. Sweat traced down my spine as oven timers screamed. Jacob waltzed in at 10:45, freshly showered, sipping iced coffee like it was a vacation morning. He leaned against the doorway, smirking. You're doing great, babe. I didn't answer. I handed him a bowl of cherry tomatoes. Wash them. He blinked like I'd asked him to translate Russian. Oh, okay. He swished them under the faucet for less than 2 minutes, set the bowl on the counter, and vanished into the garage, supposedly to get chairs. He never came back. By noon, the doorbell rang. The first guests. Bella descended the staircase like royalty, champagne flute already in hand, laughing with a woman in pink capris who looked like she owned 3 dogs named after desserts. From the kitchen doorway, I caught a glimpse of Bella's beam, her hand fluttering toward the trays of appetizers she hadn't touched. She looked like she'd catered it all herself. I retreated into steam and chaos. At 1:15, the kitchen was an inferno. Roast beef cooling on platters, potatoes refusing to crisp, cheese melting into soggy shapes. My head pounded. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the carving knife. Jacob burst in, face flushed, whisper yelling, "You're not done yet? People are asking where the food is. You're making us look unprepared." I turned, eyes burning. Jacob. I've been awake for almost 24 hours. I've made 4 courses, arranged 15 wine glasses, and cleaned the fridge you spilled sauce in last night. Stop yelling. He cut me off with a dismissive wave. Just finished plating. Mom's guests are starting to whisper. He reached for the stack of plates I'd set out. In his haste, his elbow nudged the wine bottle balanced too close to the edge. Crash. 3 porcelain plates tumbled to the floor, shattering into blue and white shards that scattered like ice across the tile. The silence after was deafening. I dropped to my knees, reaching for the largest piece before it could cut anyone. My reflection stared back at me from the broken porcelain, my own face fractured into pieces. "Don't be dramatic," Jacob muttered, already halfway out the door. "Why were they stacked like that anyway?" And then he left. Of course he did. I sat frozen among the shards, my palms stinging where the edges had already sliced thin red lines. That's when I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, a duffel bag thudding against the doorway. "Nova!" I looked up. Dean, Jacob's father. He stood there in a wrinkled dress shirt under a blazer, eyes sweeping the scene like he'd walked into the wrong house. His brow furrowed at the sight of the splintered plates, then lifted toward the table, overflowing with dishes. Steam curled into the air, the room heavy with labor. "Did you do all this?" he asked, voice quiet, stunned. I nodded, still kneeling. "By yourself?" "Yes," my voice cracked. "Jacob and Bella don't usually help. It's always just me." I reached for another shard, but Dean crouched beside me, his hand gently intercepting mine. "You'll cut yourself," he said. His tone wasn't pitying, or even angry. It was startled, as if he hadn't realized until that moment just how deep the cracks in his family ran. Together we cleaned the fragments in silence. His hands were steady, careful, gathering the sharpest pieces into a towel. When we stood, he looked again at the table. Every platter, every polished glass. Something passed across his face, not just surprise, something heavier. "Come with me," he said. I blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Come on." My heart thudded as I followed him down the hallway, past the mirror that always seemed to age me. The voices of the guests swelled in the dining room, laughter tinkling over clinking glasses. Bella was in the center, basking in her stage. When Dean entered, the noise shifted. "Oh, there you are," Bella called, smiling so wide her cheeks strained. "Everyone, this is my husband, back from Atlanta. Isn't he just the best?" A few claps. Bella raised her glass to him. Dean didn't smile. He held up a hand. "No, not yet." The room quieted. Bella's smile faltered. "Darling." "Before anyone says another word," he interrupted, turning slightly toward me, "you all need to know something." The guests looked at one another. Bella's brows drew together. Dean gestured toward the dining table. "Everything you see here, the food, the drinks, the presentation, that was Nova." A ripple of whispers traveled through the room. Someone actually gasped. Bella's face drained of color. Dean's eyes stayed on me. "She got off a night shift less than 6 hours ago, and she still did all this." His voice was clear, carrying, deliberate, the kind of voice that couldn't be ignored. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't going to retreat to family politics. He was stepping into the fire. My pulse hammered against my ribs. My hands still shook from exhaustion, but I couldn't look away. Because the party had just turned into something else. Not a celebration. A reckoning. Every eye in the dining room turned toward me. I could feel the weight of their stares, the silk rustle of dresses going still, the faint clink of bracelets against wine glasses suddenly hushed. Dean's hand rested lightly against my back, steady but not possessive. His presence felt like a shield, and it startled me how much I needed one. Bella blinked hard, her mascaraed lashes sticking together. Darling, what are you doing? This is a birthday party, not... Not what? Dean cut in, his voice sharpened. Not the truth? A tremor passed through the room. Bella forced a laugh, brittle as spun sugar. Honestly, you're being dramatic. Nova enjoys cooking. She offered. I shook my head before I could stop myself. I never offered. I was told. Every day. My voice came out hoarse, but audible. Make breakfast. Vacuum before rest. Do the laundry before you nap. A murmur spread among the guests. One woman in pearls shifted uncomfortably, her gaze flicking toward Bella as though searching for reassurance. Dean's eyes hardened. She's been working 12-hour night shifts while being your unpaid housekeeper. Bella's face tightened. Don't exaggerate. I've had health issues. She was helping me. Helping, I whispered. Or serving. Bella's jaw snapped shut. Dean folded his arms. And what has Jacob done in return? All eyes swung toward him. Jacob stood frozen near the fireplace, a half-eaten deviled egg still in his hand. His mouth opened, closed. I didn't know it was that serious. You didn't know? Dean's voice rose. You've lived here for over a year. How blind can you be? Jacob's face went pale. She never said, I did. My voice cracked like a whip. You just never listened. The silence that followed was suffocating. I reached into my pocket, fingers trembling, and pulled out the folded papers I'd carried for weeks. Insurance, evidence, a lifeline. I handed them directly to Bella. She frowned down at them. What is this? Test results, I said. My voice steadied as I spoke. Blood work, ultrasound scans, everything. Jacob's head snapped toward me. You said you weren't going to... I kept quiet to protect you. I met his eyes. But not anymore. Bella unfolded the papers, confusion sharpening to disbelief. So what? These are your results. Yes, I squared my shoulders. And they're normal. Perfectly healthy. Every system functioning. I'm not the problem. A ripple of gasps spread through the room. Jacob's face went red. Are you saying... Yes, I said, cutting him off. It's you. The doctor explained. Male factor infertility. But you refused testing. You said it would make you look weak. Pearls and bracelets gasped again. A man in the corner coughed into his glass. Dean's expression turned to stone. Jacob, I warned you after your first marriage. Stop hiding behind your mother. Stop using women like shields. But here we are again. My jaw slackened. What? Dean's gaze flicked to me, regret heavy in his eyes. Your husband did the same thing to his ex. Silent, dismissive, pushing all the blame. That's why she left. The words hit me like cold water. The ex-wife. The whispers Jacob had brushed off. They weren't whispers. They were warnings. Jacob stammered. You didn't have to bring that up. I absolutely did. Dean's tone was iron. Because you didn't learn. Bella's voice cracked, desperate now. I just wanted a grandchild. Is that a crime? Tears spilled, smudging her makeup. She clutched the table edge as if it might anchor her. All my friends. They brag about their daughters-in-law. Baby showers. Christenings. Pictures. I'm the only one without. Do you know how humiliating that is? Her sobs filled the silence, raw and high-pitched. I stared at her, stunned. Humiliating? The word cut through me. You think my exhaustion, my body, my marriage were props for your status? She choked on a sob. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You wanted a grandchild, so you weaponized motherhood. You used me as a vessel, and when nature didn't cooperate on your timetable, you blamed me. The guests shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. None rushed to comfort Bella. Jacob finally dropped the deviled egg. His voice came thin, shaky. Nova, please, let's talk privately. We can fix this. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out a second paper, the copy of the separation notice I'd drafted with a lawyer friend. I handed it to him. His face drained as though the paper itself were poison. You're divorcing me? Over this? Over this? I repeated, louder. This is the tip of the iceberg, Jacob. The cracks run deeper, and you never once tried to see them. Dean's gaze stayed locked on his son, disappointment radiating. You brought this on yourself. Jacob's lips trembled. I didn't mean to. You didn't want to mean to, Dean snapped. But you didn't stop it either. Bella sobbed harder, mascara running. Please, Nova, don't leave. We can change. You had years to change. My voice came sharp as glass. I begged. I cried. I tried to build something real, and you all let me drown. The room was a gallery of stunned faces. The birthday party had transformed into a trial, each guest a silent juror. I turned toward them, my voice carrying. If any of you think I'm being dramatic, ask yourselves, would you trade places with me? Silence. No one answered. I walked toward the front door, past the polished side table Bella had ordered me to shine last night, past the vase I'd filled with flowers at dawn, past Jacob, clutching the separation notice like it burned. I paused only once beside Dean. His eyes were shadowed, sorrowful. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner, he said quietly. I nodded. But you're here now. The doorknob was cool under my palm. As I opened it, I heard the scrape of chairs, whispered apologies, the shuffle of feet behind me. Someone murmured, I didn't know. Another whispered, makes you think, doesn't it? I didn't look back. The door closed behind me with a soft, final click. And for the first time in over a year, I walked away without needing anyone's permission. But even as the night air hit my lungs, I knew this was only the beginning. Because truth has consequences, and this house, this family, wouldn't let me leave without a fight. The night air hit my face like a slap, sharp, cleansing, almost unreal. For the first time in months, I was outside that house without a clock ticking down when I had to return. The street was quiet except for the faint hum of cicadas. I stood frozen on the front steps, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my keys. My whole body felt hollow, as if I'd left my bones inside with Bella and Jacob. I walked. I didn't know where, only that my feet kept moving. Past neatly trimmed hedges, past driveways lined with SUVs polished to suburban shine. The neighborhood looked the same as always. Perfect lawns, perfect mailboxes, but I knew better now. Behind closed doors, everyone had secrets. When my legs finally gave out, I ended up in the on-call room at the hospital. My badge still worked. The cot smelled faintly of bleach and too many forgotten naps. I curled up with my jacket for a blanket and let myself breathe. Only then did I pull out my phone. 16 texts. Jacob's messages came first. Nova, come back. We can fix this. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Don't make a permanent mistake over one fight. Please answer. I love you. Then anger. You've ruined everything. This is your fault. You didn't have to humiliate me. Then nostalgia. Remember our trip to Denver? Remember how happy we were? We can get that back. I scrolled further. Bella's texts were more erratic. You're overreacting. We were just trying to help you be a good wife. Please don't leave Jacob. Don't leave me like this. Everyone's whispering. Do you know how humiliating that is? Her tone swung wildly between pleading and barbed, as though guilt were a fishing hook she could reel me back with. The last text wasn't from either of them. It was from an unknown number, Atlanta area code. Nova, it's Dean. Call me when you're ready. No pressure. Just know you're not alone. I stared at the message for a long time, my throat thick. The next morning, I went back to the small sublet a friend from the ER had offered me, a studio with peeling paint and a futon that squeaked every time I shifted. It wasn't home, but it was mine. For the first time in over a year, I woke up without Bella's knock at the door, no list taped to the fridge, no voice announcing, lunch. Freedom tasted strange, bitter and sweet all at once. Then the fallout began. The cousin, one of Bella's guests, had recorded the entire scene on her phone. Within days, the video circulated quietly through the family grapevine. Did you see what happened at Bella's birthday? Whispered in group chats, passed from phone to phone. Some guests texted me apologies in private. I had no idea it was that bad. I'm sorry for staying quiet. But publicly? Silence. No one wanted to challenge Bella openly. Meanwhile, I started checking my bank accounts. Something nagged at me. A memory of grocery bags, auto-pay notifications. My stomach dropped when I saw the pattern. Bella had linked my card to the grocery delivery app months ago. Every household expense had quietly drained from my savings. Steaks, wine, flowers for parties I never attended. And Jacob's down payment fund, the account we were supposedly building together, empty. He hadn't contributed in months. My deposits sat alone, dwindling to nothing, while he smiled and said, "We're getting closer." It wasn't fraud. Not exactly. It was disregard. Death by 1,000 tiny cuts. I sat on the futon with my phone in my lap, staring at the numbers. Rage bubbled hot under my skin, but beneath it was something worse. Grief. Because money could be replaced. Time couldn't. Dean called that night. I almost didn't answer. But when his voice came through, steady, low, I felt my shoulders drop. I wanted to check in, he said. No expectations. Why are you helping me? I whispered. Because I should have sooner. His voice carried a weight of guilt. I thought Bella could manage things while I was gone. I didn't see how far it had gone. Silence stretched between us. Then he said, You don't owe them your life, Nova. You never did. I swallowed hard. What about Jacob? Dean sighed. That's for him to face, but don't confuse his choices with your worth. After we hung up, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. His words echoed, but so did another thought. Justice. I could forward the cousin's recording. Post it, let the whole world see what happened, burn Bella's reputation to ash. But did I want scorched earth or something sharper? I pictured Bella, sobbing into her sequined blouse, mascara running. For once, no one comforted her. Maybe silence was punishment enough. Still, the temptation lingered. A week later, Jacob showed up at the hospital parking lot. He leaned against my car like he had every right, his tie loose, eyes bloodshot. Nova, please, he said, I can change. I unlocked my car door without looking at him. Change or perform? He flinched. I love you. You love convenience, I said quietly. And I'm not convenient anymore. I drove off, leaving him staring at the taillights. Back at my sublet, I found another envelope waiting under the door. No return address. Inside was a printed photo, our wedding day. Jacob smiling, Bella's hand on his shoulder, my smile already tight at the edges. Across the bottom, scrawled in thick black pen, we can still fix this. The handwriting was Bella's. I dropped it into the trash. But as I lay awake on the futon that night, the thought clawed at me. Bella wasn't done. Not by a long shot. It was Dean who arranged the meeting. Neutral ground, he said. A cafe halfway between Bella's neighborhood and the hospital, quiet enough to talk without becoming a spectacle. I almost didn't go. Every part of me wanted to keep the door shut, let the silence finish what truth had started. But part of me needed to look Bella in the eye without the buffer of guests or champagne glasses. When I walked in, she was already there. Lavender blouse again, armor disguised as fabric. Her hands fidgeted with the rim of her mug, stirring tea she hadn't touched. Jacob sat beside her, looking smaller than I remembered. His tie hung crooked, his hair uncombed. Dean was across from them, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. I slid into the empty chair. The scrape of metal against tile echoed louder than it should have. No one spoke at first. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Finally, Bella inhaled shakily. Nova, I owe you an apology. Her voice cracked on the word, but her eyes were dry. I waited. She swallowed. I pushed too hard. I wanted things. For the family, for Jacob, for myself. And I let that want become pressure. Pressure. The word sat on the table like a sugar packet, too light for the weight it carried. Dean didn't look impressed. Call it what it was, Bella. Her eyes flashed at him, then back at me. I made you feel small, like nothing you did was enough. That wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. It was cruel. But I said nothing, letting the silence demand more. She exhaled through her nose. And I was wrong about the baby. The word trembled. Wrong to blame you. I didn't know it was Jacob. Jacob flinched. All eyes turned to him, his face mottled pink, then red. I didn't want it to be true. His voice cracked. Do you know what it's like to feel broken? To think your whole identity as a man could collapse because of one test? I stared at him, incredulous. Do you know what it's like to be treated like a defective appliance because you won't face that truth? He winced. Dean leaned forward, voice low but fierce. Jacob, you hid behind your mother's expectations. Again. You used Nova's silence as a shield. Again. This is a pattern, not a mistake. Jacob's jaw tightened. I can change. I shook my head. Not with promises, with actions. Dean cleared his throat. That brings us here. Terms. Boundaries. If there's to be any path forward, it can't be on Bella's terms or Jacob's denial. It has to be on yours, Nova. The table went still. My hands didn't shake this time. I folded them, steady. Then hear me. Bella's gaze flicked nervously between us. No more cohabitation, I began. I will never live under Bella's roof again. Not for a night, not for a weekend, not at all. Bella's lips parted, an objection on the edge. Dean's sharp glance silenced it. Financial disentanglement, I continued. My accounts are mine. Grocery apps, household bills, down payment funds. I've reviewed the charges. It ends now. Full separation. Jacob's face drained. Nova, don't interrupt me. My voice didn't waver. He closed his mouth. Therapy, I said. If you want to rebuild anything with me, Jacob, you go, weekly. And not just for infertility, for the silence, for the avoidance, for the way you let your mother's voice drown mine. His eyes glistened. I'll go. I didn't soften. And you, I said, turning to Bella. You have no authority over me. Not my schedule, not my body, not my marriage. If you want to be part of my life, it will be on my terms, not yours. Her mouth trembled. I wanted to matter. For a flicker, I saw the fear underneath. The woman desperate not to be left behind, watching friends parade grandchildren while she clutched empty arms. But sympathy wasn't the same as forgiveness. Then matter differently, I said quietly, without using me. The silence afterward was different, heavy, but shifted, like the air just before a storm breaks. Dean broke it first. There's something else. We all looked at him. His expression hardened. My will. Bella stiffened. Dean continued. You know the terms, Bella. They've been there for years. No coercion of spouses. No financial manipulation. Any violation, and your share is reduced. Her face flushed crimson. You can't. I can, he said sharply, and I will. The cafe went quiet again, except for the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. Bella's hand shook as she reached for her tea. So that's it? You'd cut me out? Dean's voice softened, but his eyes didn't. I'd protect the people you should have protected. Jacob looked down at his hands, knuckles white. Bella stared at me like I'd stolen something. But for the first time, I didn't feel small under her gaze. I felt free. Because the terms weren't requests, they were contracts. And contracts meant choice. Dean leaned back. So, Nova, do you see a path forward? I inhaled slowly. The steam from Bella's untouched tea curled between us like smoke. I see a path, I said, but whether Jacob and Bella can walk it, that's up to them. The recording leaked before I made any choice about it. Not by me, not by Dean, but by Bella's own niece, the cousin with the glittering phone, who couldn't resist sending it to a friend, who sent it to another, until it spilled into group chats and Facebook threads like gasoline on dry grass. By the end of the week, nearly everyone in their social circle had watched it. Bella's performance, the sobs, the pleas, the cracks in her mask, were replayed at brunch tables and whispered over wine glasses. People who'd once admired her perfection now smirked. Did you hear what happened at Bella's party? The woman who had thrived on appearances was suddenly suffocating under them. Jacob showed up at my sublet again, suit wrinkled, eyes rimmed with red. He knocked until my neighbor threatened to call security. When I finally opened the door, he looked at me like a drowning man begging for rope. Nova, he whispered. I'll do it. Therapy, testing, whatever you want. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Not whatever I want. What you should have done months ago, years ago. He swallowed. I can change. Then prove it, not to me, to yourself. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. Because love, real love, doesn't beg you to shrink. It asks you to grow. And Jacob had chosen shrinking too many times. A week later, Dean called. His voice carried a weight that almost cracked. She's unraveling, he admitted. The calls, the crying, the anger, it's all spilling out. But for the first time, she's listening. Really listening. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to laugh. Listening now, after years of deaf ears, convenient timing. But another part of me, a part I hadn't listened to in a long time, whispered that maybe people can change. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because change is the only thing keeping them from collapsing. Bella invited me to tea 2 weeks later. No sequined blouse, no stage performance. Just a cardigan, hair loose, eyes tired. I wanted to tell you, she said slowly. I'm sorry, not for the party, not just for the chores, for everything, for making you feel like a womb with legs instead of a person. The words hung in the air, fragile, almost unbelievable. I studied her face. She wasn't acting. The desperation was still there, but it wasn't sharpened into cruelty. It was raw. Apologies, I said, aren't about words. They're about behavior. She nodded, and for the first time, didn't argue. Meanwhile, Jacob started therapy. Dean kept me updated, careful not to push. He's fighting himself, he admitted, but at least he's in the ring this time. I didn't rush back. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't play wife on command. Because love after a fire doesn't mean running back into the smoke. It means building where the ground is steady. One evening, I stood in my tiny sublet kitchen, frying eggs in a pan that hissed and popped. My futon was still squeaky, my walls still cracked, but the space was mine. No footsteps behind me, no voice demanding, "Where's the coffee?" Just silence. And in that silence, peace. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Jacob's therapist's office, confirmation of his fertility test appointment. Another message from Bella, a photo of a community center where she'd signed up to volunteer, the caption, "Trying to matter differently." And one from Dean, "Proud of you, no matter what happens next." I set the phone face down. Because for the first time, the next step wasn't about their choices, it was about mine. I plated the eggs, sat at the rickety table, and ate slowly. The yolks were bright, golden, steady. At the bottom of my inbox, the old voicemail from an Atlanta number still waited, unopened. Maybe I'd play it tomorrow, maybe not. Either way, tomorrow was mine. And as the night settled, I whispered the promise I'd once made in exhaustion, now transformed. If no one protects me, I will. But more than that, I choose who's allowed in.